Clumio backtracks, Aryaka surveys manufacturing, engineering platforms. Is your ISP support great? Red Hat donates this holiday season, costly cybercrime, and we take a look at all of the announcements coming out of Supercomputing 24 in this episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown. It is Wednesday, November 27th, also known as Turkey Day Eve. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I am very happy to be joining you on this Wednesday to talk about all of the great news before we all go into a turkey coma for the next 4 days, or whatever your favorite source of tryptophan is. Joining me, of course, on this great episode is Mr. Stephen Foskett. Stephen, it's a pleasure to have you here on National Jukebox Day.
Yes, well, I prefer that to National Craft Jerky Day. Somebody asked me, what are all these holidays and where do they come from? And the answer is nobody knows. Absolutely nobody knows. Any holiday list that would include National Craft Jerky Day just doesn't deserve to exist.
But what does deserve to exist, of course, is all of the great news stories that we've rounded up for you to maybe distract you from your in-laws while they're arguing about whether or not it's called dressing or stuffing in the kitchen, because we have stuffed this episode completely full.
That is definitely not what's going to be the subject of argument this year around the American table, Tom. Sorry.
Hey, I'm going old school because that's just how it is. But thankfully, we have new things coming out. Like, for example, if you happen to need to restore billions of stored objects to an S3 data bucket, Commvault now has a solution for you. This new release from the recently acquired Clumio is called Backtrack. It uses S3's versioning capability to help track backup copies of objects. Now, one important thing is that Clumio Backtrack also allows you to manage those versions to keep them from growing out of control and, of course, costing you a small fortune. There is a very nice GUI-based calendaring system to do that. Backtrack will be available in preview starting in December and will probably be generally available in the first quarter of 2025. What's important about this is the first release from Clumio since they were acquired by Commvault. So, Stephen, what do you think about the fact that they're kind of going all in on this cloud-native solution? I know that was something Clumio kind of specialized in, but this is where Commvault's really kind of showing off why they wanted this company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is really, well, first off, no surprise that this is being announced. Of course, this is being announced. This is what Clumio is great at. And of course, that's one of the reasons that Commvault wanted them. As we talked about last month in London, Commvault had their Shift event where they previewed and announced they announced a lot of things. They previewed this thing. They actually had the Clumio team on stage. Nice shoes, by the way. And they suggested that Backtrack was coming soon. And guess what? Here it is. So what's this all about? Well, Commvault, a year ago at Shift, was very, very tight with Microsoft and Azure. And that makes sense because Azure, of course, is one of the leading cloud providers and is probably the leading cloud providers in Commvault's core customer base. So it makes sense that they would lead with Azure. But Commvault has not rested on its Microsoft laurels and Microsoft partnerships. This year at Shift, we heard a lot more about Amazon Web Services and other cloud providers as well. Because, of course, that's what Commvault needs to do. That's what Commvault's customers need them to do because many customers are using a variety of cloud providers. Now, one of the things that they talked about was their new capability of Cloud Rewind, which allows companies to survey the configuration of cloud-native applications and checkpoint and restore those. They also have their clean room technology up and running now, which allows you to bring a clean, known good copy of your environment up and running in the cloud. Backtrack is another great capability. So think about it this way. S3 buckets are increasingly popular in terms of storing enterprise data. I actually talked about that yesterday on the Techstrong gang in some detail because the question was put to me Don't customers use NAS and NFS and SMB file shares for unstructured data? And the answer is they think they do. But really, if you're building cloud native applications, you're using S3 protocol and S3 buckets. And probably these days, most enterprises, most businesses generally have more data in S3 storage, object storage in the cloud than they do on conventional unstructured data solutions like NAS. In fact, it's probably more by a long shot. The problem is that that's sort of a big mess. Most companies have application developers or different application owners signing up for S3 services and signing up for buckets. They've got data all over the place. Also, the important thing to know is that these data buckets, they really are just buckets of data. You kind of don't know what it is. You don't know how the data is structured, how it's organized, et cetera. Well, that's where Backtrack comes in. So Clumio is probably the undisputed leader in really understanding S3 buckets and understanding how they're used, how the data is organized, how the data is structured. And now Commvault customers will be able to get that. And what that means is instead of saying, let me go to the AWS interface or hit the API and do, something to go back in time, you'll be able to, as Clumio customers have been able to do, have a consistent time code and say, like, look, I need all of the data across all of the buckets and only the data that's pertinent to this application. I need that to go back to this point in time. That's really the goal. That's the vision that Clumio and Commvault have for Backtrack. And I think that that's a good one because they're making this cloud technology just like they're doing with Cloud Rewind. They're making this cloud technology useful to people in the enterprise. So good on you, Commvault. It's very cool to see this technology see a wider audience. And, I'm glad to hear the announcement, the quick announcement after London. Aryaka's latest survey explores network security challenges in manufacturing, revealing key issues like resource gaps, visibility, resilience, and cost control. Over 64% of the responders prioritized real-time network observability, while 54% stressed the need for secure global connectivity. Manufacturers increasingly value convergence solutions like Aryaka's unified SASE to streamline operations, enhance security, and address these evolving demands. Tom, you're very familiar with enterprise networking and Aryaka. What was your reaction to this survey?
Honestly, it kind of tracks with some of the things that I'm seeing in the market, where the majority of what I would consider to be traditional enterprises are kind of they're a solved problem, right? Like we have connectivity for them. We have all these analytics, this rich data that we can use to do all kinds of things, right? Where's the growth area? Well, as a friend of mine in the industry coined the term here recently, it's the uncarpeted enterprise. It's the areas of your organization that are critical to the operations of your business, but are maybe not as clean. That would be like manufacturing floors. That would be remote offices where things get done. It could be an oil rig. It could be a factory floor. Whatever the case is, you still need to have connectivity for that. You're still missing data points there. So you need to be able to connect to those areas. And I don't know, pull machine uptimes, pull maintenance logs, pull all kinds of things that keep your business running, right? Well, how do you do that in a way that ensures that you can keep an eye on your capacity and ensure that nobody else can do it? You've got to have some kind of a platform for that. Let me tell you a little secret, though. Those big machines, they're not really designed to kind of just be upgraded like that. It's not like pulling a Jet Direct card out of a printer and putting a new one in to give it more functionality. And even that is a strained analogy at best. These things are entire systems that are built and manufactured in a certain way, and they don't play well with parts being bolted onto them. So by using a platform like Aryaka's unified SASE, you can essentially drop an endpoint right on top of that device and say, we're going to plug this into an SD-WAN router. And now I have connectivity down to device. But more importantly, what I have is an overlay network that ensures that I can pull data from all of those devices and, put it into my system to make sure that they're online, running at full capacity, and not being attacked. Because that's another thing that we're starting to see, and we'll have a story about this later. A lot of attackers are not just looking to steal data anymore. They're looking to take down organizations. They're looking to knock production offline, because those kinds of hiccups have far-reaching, what happens when people have to spend months getting things back up is it not only costs you money because you lost your data, but now you've literally wasted thousands of hours trying to get back online. So I think that this secure connectivity cannot be understated enough. This is gone are the days of having like open RDP servers on the internet, and having management ports for these devices kind of open and freely available, even inside of your LAN, is a big risk that I think a lot of companies aren't willing to take, because these machines, their downtime is measured in thousands of dollars per hour, and they know exactly what it will cost if that's down. So I think that you'll see very quickly that solutions like Aryaka Unified SaaS are going to be deployed more widely to these organizations in order to be able to give them the data that they want and they expect to get from all the other devices in their carpeted enterprise. What could be more complicated than the cloud? If your organization has completed their cloud migration and started to build out platforms and pipelines that leverage cloud environments, you know that there's more to it than just making clouds. There's this special kind of synergy that happens between DevOps and cloud native practices that's really its own kind of language. That's what the industry refers to as platform engineering. It's a very unique way to look at the challenges faced by organizations that have grown beyond simple DevOps and simple cloud native solutions. How can you learn more about this space? Well, thankfully, our sister site, Techstrong.tv, has introduced a new website dedicated to platform engineering, and you will not be surprised to learn that it is called platformengineering.com. Stephen, you're a pretty frequent part of the Techstrong gang. I wanted to see what you thought about what a new site like platformengineering.com means for this growing community.
Yeah, I think that it's really exciting to see this. Platform engineering is certainly an up-and-coming topic. It's something that we've heard a lot about at our Tech Field Day events, whether it's Cloud Field Day or App Dev Field Day. We've seen a lot of companies diving into this space. And for me, as an IT pro who's actually building and deploying applications, yes, I still do that. I feel that platform engineering is a really important step for the industry. So one of the challenges of DevOps, and in fact, well, actually, let's back up even beyond that. DevOps was developed because developers found it frustrating to deal with IT operations, IT infrastructure staff, and so on, because essentially there was no platform. And once cloud native applications came out, I don't say they were spoiled, but they certainly got accustomed to the idea that they could rapidly build and deploy platforms, complete platforms to run their cloud native applications. Unfortunately, for DevOps engineers, they're not necessarily, they're often developers, they're not necessarily in tune with the intricacies of building sustainable and supportable IT platforms. And so that's where the platform engineering trend came in. Essentially, the idea is to build infrastructure, yes, but also other platform aspects up into a secure, sustainable, supportable environment to run modern applications. These days, the platform engineering world, as exemplified by our friends over at platformengineering.org, which is an organization of platform engineers, includes aspects like data science, machine learning, observability and monitoring, security, compliance, IT operations, and yes, IT infrastructure management. And it's all about building something that will work and that will work for a long time to come and isn't just something sort of thrown together, which, again, I will be the first to admit is sort of naturally what happens when you focus more on application development than on the platforms that those applications run on. There are many, many platform engineers out there who are looking for content, looking for support, looking for ideas. As I said, many of them have come together in the platform engineering community at platformengineering.org. And platformengineering.com is intended to be a news site to cater to those people so that they will have a place to come to learn about the latest in platform engineering. And I will say that many of the Tech Field Day presentations will be appropriate for that audience, and we'll be live streaming those on platformengineering.com. We'll also be writing feature articles for platformengineering.com going forward. And I'm pretty excited at the opportunity to speak with this new, rising, and very much needed critical group of people within the enterprise. ISPs are back in the news again, as the FCC is poised to have some big changes in the next year. One of the things on the table is new regulations around mandated improvements to customer support. ISPs are fighting back against some of these regulations by saying that market competition and market conditions force them to focus on cost savings or better service or risk losing customers. Two different industry lobbying groups are opposed to the proposed rules, which would require companies to offer live customer support reps in a reasonable time frame. The ISP argument is that AI chat agents keep improving and could replace these support reps in the coming years. Tom, what's more fun than calling your ISP? Talking to a chatbot, right?
Hold on just a second. Let me react to this news in the way that only one of the greatest reactions can be. Wait, you're serious? Like, look, this is the thing. The FCC was pretty clear. You need to have the ability for someone to get a hold of a live support agent and tell them what your problem is so that you can get it fixed. And two different lobbying groups said, no, we think that's dumb. Let me give you a perfectly good example of why this is a great idea. I ordered something from Amazon during the last big Prime Day, and they shipped me the wrong stuff. Like, I ordered a light switch and a spool of filament, and somehow I ended up with a set of headphones and a power scrubber. Obviously not my order, right? My name was right on the box, but the stuff inside of it was completely wrong. So I log on to Amazon, and this should be an easy fix. There should be a button that says, I got the wrong stuff. In fact, there is not. There is a button that says, I have a problem with my order. And when you click on it, you get an automated chatbot, and you tell it, I got the wrong stuff for the things that I ordered. And they're like, oh, obviously you got this. No, that's not what I got. It took 4 different attempts of me saying, please just let me talk to a person before it finally said, okay, fine, I can't help you. Call this number. Called the number, 30 seconds. The guy's like, oh yeah, that happens all the time. Well, then why don't you program your system to understand it? Like, that's the thing. Listen, ISPs, if you don't believe that it's important to have a live person taking care of your stuff, I'll give you a real easy one. I'm replacing your lawyers and your financial advisors with AI chatbots. Got a problem with it now? I bet you do, because those are professions where you still believe that a human mind is better than a software algorithm. Support is no different, and I know that you guys look down on support people like they are just another cog in the wheel. I'm one of those support people. I used to do phone support 20 years ago, and I promise you, when you get a cranky 68-year-old man in Florida who can't understand why his Windows XP is doing weird stuff and has all these pop-ups, ain't no AI chatbot going to be able to fix that problem, at least not to the satisfactory resolution that he wants. You have got to do better. And I look at it like this. If you are already providing such amazing support that it would cost you hundreds, if not thousands of customers to do so, to not be able to do it, then what's the harm in making a rule that says, here's the bare minimum that you have to provide? And if you have a problem with that, I think it kind of tips your hand by saying your ultimate goal is to eliminate all of the human support people, or eliminate so many of them that it is rare enough to get a hold of one of those folks that you may not be able to do it for a few days. I don't know. Ask the people in Western North Carolina how it feels to not be able to get a hold of a support rep for a few days because their internet's out. I bet you that they would probably have a different story to tell, because it's kind of hard to talk to a chatbot with no internet and no cell phone coverage, or at least no data coverage, because that's the first thing that gets knocked offline in the middle of a natural disaster. You can still get voice calls through, but you can't get data through, because that takes way too much bandwidth. And they need to preserve that bandwidth for people to be able to talk on the phone. I don't know, to let their loved ones know they're still alive. Maybe you need to be able to let your local ISP know that you need to get your data back online so you can, I don't know, start filing insurance claims on your destroyed house. Here's an idea. Start treating people like human beings instead of treating them like AIs. All right, I'm off my soapbox now. During KubeCon, Red Hat announced that they're going to be donating some of their container tools to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. The tools include Compose FS, which is an overlay file system, and Builda, a tool which is used for building Open Container Initiative images and could only have been built in Boston. The biggest donation, though, has to be Podman. It's a set of container management tools that has been positioned over the years as an alternative to Docker, and Red Hat has really been using it as a way to train new users on the basics of containers. And if you just so happen to be using Podman as your training tool, then that means that whenever you start deploying them in the enterprise, you'll probably be using Podman as well. Now, Stephen, you were at KubeCon. What does the community think about these donations?
Well, first of all, I can say with confidence that the community very much appreciates Red Hat in the open cloud native world. In fact, there was a lot of buzz about the fact that Red Hat and IBM's general support for open source and the CNCF may be a template that other companies may follow, specifically companies that IBM is acquiring. I wonder who that could be. And that's pretty exciting. The other thing, of course, is that a lot of these folks use Podman. Everybody I talked to, was happy or about this topic, was happy to hear about it. I personally really enjoy Podman. I think that it's a really nice application as sort of an alternative to maybe a Docker desktop or something like that, as a way to manage all the running containers that you have. I love the fact that it's flexible. It can integrate with Kubernetes, yes, but it can also be used to manage other container engines, including, yes, Docker. So if you happen to have containers running in Kubernetes as well as in other engines, it's a great opportunity for you. And yes, it supports OpenShift if you're an OpenShift company. It's also just a kind of a nice, friendly application. The other thing about Podman, of course, is that it's not just a desktop environment. It also has command line options. And that, for me, is important because, to be honest, I don't use Docker desktop. I am 100% command line, and I think a lot of folks like me are. And so there again, it's helpful to be able to build and run and share running containers and container instances. And now that it's an open source project in the hands of the CNCF, I think a lot of folks are going to be a lot more willing to integrate it into their environment. This is a critical need, as our research organization at Futurum and Techstrong have found that organizations really are trying to find skills to manage and orchestrate containers and support DevOps. And they found it difficult to do that. So a application like Podman that makes it easier for maybe less technical people to manage applications is a really good thing for the industry as well. So good job. Thank you, Red Hat. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you open source in the next few months or throughout 2025. Reuters is reporting that cyber attacks have cost British businesses $55 billion over the past 5 years. The attacks were specifically measured in lost revenue, with the number amounting to 1.9% of the total revenue reported by all businesses over that period. The biggest offenders are email compromises and data thefts. Surprisingly, only 61% of businesses were running antivirus software, and 45% weren't even using firewalls. Tom, is this news surprising to you?
Would it bother you if I said it's only surprising in that the numbers weren't bigger? Like, okay, it's 2% of their revenue, which is not an insubstantial amount. And it is kind of amortized over 5 years if you think about it like this. But I want you to think back to just 5 years ago, which was right before the height of the pandemic when everybody started working from home. And think about what the security landscape looked like back then versus what it looks like now. It is impressive when you think about the sophistication that goes into some of these attacks. And then it's disheartening to realize that 20% of all of the lost revenue attacks are email compromise. And that is not what we saw with Microsoft with the password spraying, getting in, rooting through Active Directory, and stealing the executives' credentials to log into their inboxes. No, that would be the weekly emails that I get from Daniel Newman asking me to click on this WhatsApp link and send him Apple gift cards to pay off a potential client in whatever. That's what they're talking about. And you know why it's 20% of this number? Because it works. Because we have not done a good enough job of training our people to understand that there are certain things you just don't do. Yes, there needs to be more antivirus. And calling it antivirus, Reuters, really? We are way past antivirus at this point. EDR, endpoint detection and response, is kind of the new term that we use. And even EDR is on its way out because we've moved on to things like XDR, which takes EDR and makes it even more integrated into the system so that you can see when things are going on at a level above just a simple desktop. But never mind that now. No, nobody's using firewalls. Like, come on. That's kind of part and parcel. It'd be like, oh, we don't need to put seatbelts in that car. You're never going to get into an accident. Yeah, the only reason that you actually do have that is because it's mandated. And I think that we're kind of at the point where maybe we need to mandate that people are going to be running firewalls or some kind of boundary device for security. But more importantly, we've got to do a better job of helping our people understand basic data hygiene. If you lock your car doors before you go into a store, if you lock your doors before you leave your house, you are showing basic hygiene. We need to apply those same principles to not randomly sending Apple gift cards to people. We need to, apply that same thing to data storage, right? Why are we keeping mountains of data in places where it can be easily apprehended and carried out and all kinds of ridiculousness? This is not ransomware payments. This is not lost time due to recovery. This is literally the amount of money that these companies have lost in lost business and payouts. So think about how much bigger that number would be if you included the fact that every time one of these breaches happens, you have to dedicate resources to plugging the holes and figuring out what people have gotten. I hate to say it, but the reason why the cybersecurity industry is as big as it is simply because so much money is flowing out to these organizations that if the cyber security industry can stem even 10% of that tide, that's billions of dollars in revenue. So I get that there's a tool for this or there's a platform for that, but if we could do a better job of teaching people not to read out their social security number on a speakerphone in an airport, I think we could do away with a lot of these tools and maybe just make the world a better place overall. But what do I know? All right, Stephen, we wanted to take a closer look at an event that happened last week because the week before Thanksgiving is always super busy. This year, it seemed like there were tons of conferences, but one of the biggest was Supercomputing. And Supercomputing 24 took place in Atlanta and had over 17,000 attendees and over 500 presenting companies. There was a lot of technology to discuss, and I think we wanted to jump in to a few of the announcements because I thought it was kind of interesting. But one I actually want to start off with was the National Science Foundation keynote, because I know that one of the largest consumers of supercomputing power out there is NSF, and they do a lot with it that maybe it's not commercially facing, but I think a lot of what they're doing to drive innovation in supercomputing kind of trickles down into the enterprise. So what did you think about the NSF keynote?
Well, the interesting aspect really was, two things. Number one, that it focused on AI at an HPC conference. And number two, that it focused on the question of trustworthy, safe, secure computing. Now, really, there was two things that stood out to me about the NSF keynote. Now, number one, that it was focused on AI at an HPC conference, which may not surprise some of you who aren't intimately familiar with HPC, but generally speaking, the HPC community has been somewhat reluctant to be lumped in with the AI world. The other thing that surprised many was that it was focused on safe and secure and trustworthy computing. Now, that shouldn't be a surprise considering that it was given by Tess DeBlanc-Knowles, who is a special assistant to the Director for Artificial Intelligence at the NSF and an advisor on the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, co-chairing the National AI Research Resource Task Force. In other words, she is one of the people who is responsible for developing and championing the current administration's approach to computing, and that means a heavy focus on trustworthy, safe, and secure and responsible AI development. Now, this is really an interesting aspect here because in the past, HPC focus as an industry has been basically, let's see how fast we can go. Let's do this thing. Step on the gas, let's move. That's not exactly what's happening anymore. I think that the trend of, or the concerns over power consumption, over the proliferation of AI and AI technologies, and the ever-rising costs of supercomputing are finally coming home to roost in the industry, to the point where people in the industry are starting to ask questions about where they're going and what's rational and what they need to do in order to drive the overall HPC space forward. Now, I think that's a welcome change. I think it's a good thing that this is happening. But at the same time, you turn around, you look at the show floor, and there's a lot of the same. We are seeing, massive power-sucking GPUs. We're seeing a proliferation of liquid cooling. We're seeing a lot of announcements around storage and networking. And frankly, that's where a lot of the buzz was. So let's take a look at a few of those things. Tom, I wonder if you can give us a look at some of the networking innovations that appeared at Supercomputing.
Yeah, probably the craziest one was NVIDIA's new Connect X8 Super NIC. We're going to link to a story from Serve the Home in the show notes. Go check this thing out. It is the most boring looking, amazing NIC you've ever seen. First of all, it looks like something that Big Bird would have in a PC. It is a big yellow heatsink stuck on top of this network card. In fact, Serve the Home says that this doesn't even look like a network card anymore. This looks like a GPU that has network connectivity. By the way, I want everybody to notice that is a single port 800 gigabit NIC. Single port with a giant heatsink. That should give you an idea of what kind of power we're dealing with here. But more importantly, it requires a Gen 6 X16 port. If you don't have one of those, you need two Gen 5 X16 ports in order to be able to run this NIC at full capacity. And I agree with the reviewer here. You have finally built a NIC that a CPU can't overrun. Like, that's impressive when you think about it. Like, think about all of the problems that you've had in a system. I liken it to like the interstate highway system, right? Like when we fix a bottleneck, we don't actually fix the traffic problem. We just move the bottleneck to a different area, right? So when we make memory faster, then we move the bottleneck to the CPU. When we make the CPUs faster, we move the bottleneck over to the storage. Historically, though, if you're doing things in and out of a computer, the bottleneck has always been the NIC because there's only so much data that I can force out of that pipe. But for NVIDIA, they're trying to eliminate that. 800 gigabit per second NICs. I remember when I first got involved in doing networking and on social media, and I thought how amazing it was that we finally had a 400 gigabit per second spec. Like, we didn't even have hardware yet. It had just been finalized, and that was 12, 13 years ago. And now we have 800 gigabit per second NICs in production with giant heat sinks that look like video cards that can overwhelm CPUs with the amount of data that they can throw out. And NVIDIA is going to take full advantage of this with NVLink and all the other stuff that they're doing to be able to push data through these AI clusters as fast as possible. I think that NVIDIA is not going to stop. They have the CPU and GPU resources necessary to consume all of that data that's being thrown over that bandwidth. I think the biggest question that I'm going to have is, when is this technology going to be miniaturized and shrunk down and put into a form factor that would allow for more of these things to be plugged into a system? Because one of the biggest challenges, as we mentioned, is heat. And you kind of mentioned it in the intro, Stephen, but there are some solutions out there that are looking at going away from air cooling to liquid cooling. I mean, Flex acquired JetCool. Valvoline is showing off F1 inspired cooling tech. Are we about to switch away from, blowing air all over these things to, basically creating plumbed pipes to be able to keep things cool?
Yeah, it's all about liquid cooling, man. And that's what everyone was talking about from Supercomputing was, honestly, last year and the year before as well. Obviously, there was a lot of liquid cooling, a lot of immersion cooling and things like that. This year, I talked to one friend of mine in the industry who went to a lot of these booths and saw a lot of these things. And essentially, he said, it's all about liquid cooling. We've gotten to the point now where air isn't going to cut it. Everything is liquid cooled. Everything interesting is liquid cooled, and it's everywhere. As you mentioned, we even have Valvoline, the petrochemical company here, talking about liquid cooling, advanced liquid cooling fluids. Who would have had Valvoline on their bingo card from a high performance computing show a couple of years ago? But here they are, and here we are. And it's obvious in some of the other announcements too. One of the things that was shown, for example, was NVIDIA showing off their GB200 NVL4. Now, again, this is not as necessarily a liquid-cooled platform, but it's a low-powered platform. So that's the interesting thing. So whereas you get these incredible news stories about the NVL72 and even the NVL36, which have just huge power requirements. This is a little boy. This is a little guy for smaller deployments, but for perspective, it's still 6 kilowatts. That's what we're looking at here. We're looking at the little, not even the little brother, the little baby brother of NVIDIA's latest Grace Blackwell combination. And it's still a 6 kilowatt package in a server with NIC and SSDs and other components. That's just wild, absolutely wild that we've gotten to that point where that's considered small and low powered. And remember, these things use ARM CPUs, which are lower powered as well. They've got integrated interconnects, which reduce the power component consumption. A lot of work has been done to make these things more energy efficient, and yet we're still pulling down many, many kilowatts, even for a small platform. Another thing that we've seen as well is an increasing focus on utilization of processors and technology. That has been a big problem in the industry, because if you've spent literally billions of dollars on expensive, high-end, latest generation NVIDIA GPUs and all of the stuff used to support that, and you can't keep those GPUs fed, well, then you've got problems, real financial problems. And that's where the storage industry is stepping up. So we're seeing companies like Hammerspace coming in with tier 0 storage that's much, much faster. We've got, Hitachi Vantara there. I was just talking to Weka about how they're feeding GPUs and that they're seeing this as one of the, big markets for their Weka pod infrastructure. In fact, they just announced a high performance Weka pod that is able to serve GPUs even faster. Quantum was there with Myriad. Another product I want to call out, Solidigm. They just announced in New York a 122 terabyte SSD. That's a single device. Now, it's not something you're going to put in your laptop, but for data center and HPC usage, 122 terabytes. The news there is that the thing has unlimited longevity. Essentially, Solidigm guarantees it will work for 5 years, and it's incredibly fast. So, again, it's all about keeping those GPU pipelines fed. And that's where we're seeing in the storage industry. We've got Vast Data. We've got Panasys is now called Vidura, IBM, Dell, NetApp, Pure Storage. All these companies are in here talking about how they are able to keep these GPUs fed. And one of the things that I heard from an architect at one of the AI HPC companies was, quite frankly, storage is effectively free in the context of the amount of money it costs to have GPU resources idle. So they're willing to spend any amount of money to get absolutely not the best possible performance, but enough performance that those GPUs don't idle. And that is a massive opportunity for the storage industry. Any final thoughts, Tom?
No, I think it's interesting that we've talked about how all of these rising tides have kind of lifted up. I mean, we didn't even talk about HP's Slingshot 400 switch, which is a 400 gigabit interconnect switch. It's needed to keep the AI HPC clusters running outside of those power hungry NICs and storage solutions. Like we've seen the acceleration of these pipelines significantly over the past couple of years because we're finally throwing enough stuff at them that we need that speed. I remember hearing all about how data gravity was going to cause all of these big data applications to live in these areas, and we were going to have to deploy the applications much more closely to where they live. And now, just years later, we're talking about, well, what if you could just stuff all of that data in a giant pipeline and shove it into these GPU accelerated Gen AI algorithms and do all this amazing stuff with it? It turns out that a lot of what we needed to do to innovate in the data center had nothing to do with, making a slightly faster horse that eats a little less hay. We had to find a killer application that necessitated this. I mean, look at the number of times on the rundown this year we've talked about restarting nuclear power in the US in the next decade because it's the only way we're going to be able to feed all of these applications. Like liquid cooling, all of the components in the data center. I've even seen some talk about doing immersion cooling where we're just going to lay the racks over in a pool of oil. Like, I don't even know. But then you look at things like AMD pulling ahead of NVIDIA in the new supercomputing list, and then like 72% of the new GPU power coming online is from AMD. I mean, what does that ultimately mean? It means that these companies are literally trying to outpace each other at breakneck speeds. And I don't know where the technology is finally going to fall over. And Gordon Moore is going to be like, you know what? I'm out. I've had enough of this.
Well, it's funny. We have actually pulled way ahead of Moore's Law if you look at systems as a whole. Because of this parallel computing revolution, GPUs are coming online, dedicated AI processors are coming online. The absolutely brutal competition between Intel and AMD and ARM for the CPU space, between NVIDIA and AMD on the GPU space, and between many, many customers, including, of course, companies like Broadcom and Qualcomm on the neural processing space, it really has become a revolution. You look at, who would have had on their dance card that we would get to the point where we can't make these things run any faster in terms of gigahertz, and yet we're still doubling, tripling, quadrupling performance on a regular basis simply by adding more and more nodes, connecting them ever faster, feeding them ever faster. It really is remarkable where we've come with this stuff. And back to the beginning, it also raises the question that we have to think about the impact of what we have built here. We are building systems that consume just mind-boggling amounts of energy to the point where we have to span data centers. We're building systems that, as you said, require us to think about nuclear power and alternative power sources. We're going to have to figure out as an industry where we're going to go now that we've given ourselves this incredible gift of just massive, massive computing resources.
Absolutely. Technology continues to march on, and we'll be covering it here on the rundown. But before we get to that, we have some upcoming events that we want to make sure that you're aware of. And the biggest tech event of the year, at least by attendee count, of course, happens the week after Thanksgiving. And Stephen, you're going to be there.
Absolutely. AWS reInvent is coming up right after Thanksgiving. We are going to be there. Techstrong is going to be there. 6.5 Media is going to be there. So many of the Futurum analysts are going to be there. And of course, so many of the regular industry folks are going to be there as well. So keep an eye out. We'll have a special field day showcase from Click. We'll be watching for the Techstrong gang every single day from reInvent. We're going to watch for Techstrong Live. We're going to watch for incredible interviews and insights coming from the 6.5 media side. Basically, there's going to be a ton of content coming out December 2nd through 6th as part of reInvent. Now, that's pretty much the last Tech Field Day event of the year, but we'll be back with AI Field Day at the end of January and Cloud Field Day run by our good friend Alistair Cook in February. So keep an eye out for those. And Tom, I know that you've got more events coming up too.
Yeah, we've finally published our full 2025 calendar. So if you go to techfieldday.com, you can see the things that are lined up. Now, if you look on the calendar, you'll see that my first event's actually going to be in mid-March. It'll be another round of our friends at Networking Field Day. And I mean, when you think about all of the stuff that I talked about in this episode of the Rundown that is networking focused, I'm excited to see where we go in the industry. But there's other things that get added to the calendar once we've confirmed them. So stay tuned, because there might be something coming up around Valentine's Day that, you know, for people who heart networking, you're not going to want to miss it. But I don't want to say more until we get there. But always make sure you check out techfieldday.com for the latest of what's going on, because we do so much now that you never know when we're going to pop into an event like a KubeCon or a Cisco Live Europe and have some opportunities to talk, get some information about new releases or talk to companies who are doing exciting things in the space. But you should also tune in to the Gestalt IT Rundown every Wednesday, because that is where we will give you the latest breaking news about what's going on in the industry, you know, some of the bigger trends that you need to be aware of, but sometimes some fun little stories about, data breaches and companies releasing new hardware. Whatever it is, we will always be here Wednesday afternoons, whether you're going to be listening to us on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Gestalt IT video, whether you're going to be checking out the show notes on gestaltit.com, or if you want to listen to us as a podcast, just search for the Gestalt IT Rundown. And you can listen to us while you're out running or mowing the yard, or if you're trying to ignore your family members while they're shouting at the football game on TV. No matter what it is, we're here for you. You can also check us out on all of our sister sites at Techstrong TV, as well as the Futurum Group. We also feature a lot of our Futurum Group friends here on the Rundown as guest contributors. So we appreciate all the hard work that they put in at events like this. We're going to be back next Wednesday with more great news. But, until then, take some time off if you're in the U.S. for the holiday. If you're not in the U.S., that's why nobody in the U.S. is answering your emails for the next couple of days. Take that opportunity to reflect and give thanks, not just for 800 gigabit NICs and water-cooled servers, but also all of the other wonderful things that are going on in your life. We'll be back with more great news next week. I'm sure that nothing will happen over the weekend that will require us to sit down in front of a computer in a tryptophan coma and write out a script. But even if it does, you know that we'll be here to deliver you the news. So for myself, Tom Hollingsworth, for Stephen Foskett, and for all the wonderful people behind the scenes that we never give enough thanks to, but who totally deserve it, enjoy your holiday, enjoy your week, and we'll see you in December for the next episode of The Rundown.